All right, so let's dive into one of history's biggest maritime mysteries, the Mary Celeste. You've probably heard the basic story.
Oh, wow.
A ship just abandoned, found drifting in 1872.
Yeah.
But the details, oh man, they get me every time. Picture this. The day Gracia comes across this ship, sails are set, looks fine from the outside. There's nobody on board, not a single soul.
Yeah, it's like a ghost ship.
Exactly. Belongings, cargo, food, everything just left there. It's, well, it's spooky, to say the least. So today, let's take a look at this new YouTube investigation and try to figure out once and for all what happened to the crew of the Mary Celeste.
I think it's the lack of a clear answer that makes this so fascinating. We're not talking about some shipwreck, lost to time. This was a pretty modern ship, well maintained. There were no signs of distress, at least not at first glance.
Yeah, exactly. So to really get this mystery, we got to go back to 1872. Can you set this scene for us?
Of course. So the Mary Celeste was a brigantine. That's a two-masted merchant ship. Super common back then. It wasn't a small ship either. About 103 feet long, and it could carry over 280 tons of cargo.
Wow, so this was a substantial vessel. What was she carrying on this particular voyage?
Well, on this trip, it was 7,701 barrels of commercial alcohol.
7,701 barrels of alcohol. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, they set sail from New York on November 7th, headed for Genoa, Italy. Captaining the ship was Benjamin Briggs, an experienced seaman. He had his wife and young daughter on board too, and a crew of 7.
Oh, wow, a family affair.
Yeah.
Tragic. So what do we know about their journey? I mean, where does the mystery really begin?
Well, the last log entry is from November 25th, and it places them just a few miles off Santa Maria Island in the Azores.
So just 10 days later, the Dea Gracia finds the Mary Celeste hundreds of miles away, and it's totally empty. What did the investigators find? Anything.
Well, the first official inquiry was kind of focused on salvage rights, who gets the ship and all that. But even the Attorney General at the time, he suspected there was something more to it. They didn't find any signs of a fight or violence on the ship. And get this, the cargo was untouched.
Hold on. Untouched? That's weird. Doesn't that rule out some of the more obvious theories?
Yeah, like pirates, right. You'd think if pirates took the crew hostage, they'd at least grab some of that alcohol.
Makes sense. So if it wasn't pirates, what about a mutiny? I mean, with all that alcohol on board, things could have gotten out of hand.
Yeah, that's a popular theory, for sure. The idea is that the crew got drunk, things escalated, and they killed each other. It's a good story, but it doesn't really hold up.
How so? What makes you think it wasn't a mutiny?
Well, we know from later research and from interviews with descendants of the crew that Captain Briggs, he was a very religious man. He ran a tight ship.
Right.
And he was known to be a teetotaler.
A teetotaler, so he didn't drink at all.
Nope, not a drop. So the whole idea of a drunken rampage, especially with his family on board, it's pretty unlikely.
Yeah, I can see that. Plus, you said the cargo was untouched, so if it wasn't pirates or a drunken brawl, what other explanations were considered?
Well, some people thought that maybe fumes from the alcohol could have caused an explosion, and that forced the crew to abandon ship. But there's no evidence of fire or damage to back that up.
It doesn't seem like the most plausible explanation, does it?
Not really. Plus, you'd think an experienced captain like Briggs would know how to handle a cargo of alcohol. I mean, it wasn't exactly uncommon.
Okay, so we've ruled out pirates, mutiny, and an alcohol explosion. So where does that leave us? What's this new YouTube investigation focusing on?
It takes a closer look at the evidence, particularly the ship's log. And there are some discrepancies in the timeline. It's really intriguing.
Okay, I'm all ears. Let's hear it.
So remember that last log entry? It put the Mary Celeste about 6 miles off Santa Maria Island, but when they found her, she was 400 miles to the east.
Wait, what? 400 miles? That's a huge difference.
Yeah, it is. That's a long way to drift in just 10 days,
Yeah.
even with good wind.
You're right. That does seem like something happened. That's something out of the ordinary. Was there anything else in the logbook? Anything that could explain this?
There are a couple of things that stand out. First, Briggs mentions rough weather in the days leading up to that last entry. And then there's a note about problems with the chronometer.
Okay, I'm going to need a little help here. What exactly is a chronometer? And why would that be such a big deal?
Well, imagine sailing across the Atlantic back in the 1870s. No GPS, no satellites, nothing like that. To figure out your longitude, your position east or west, you needed a chronometer.
Ah, got it. Like an old school GPS.
Exactly. It was basically a super accurate clock. It kept Greenwich Mean Time. And by comparing the chronometer's time with the local time, which you could get from the sun, you could calculate your longitude.
So if the chronometer wasn't working,
Briggs wouldn't know his exact position. He could be miles off course and not even realize it.
Ah, okay. Now that's a problem.
It is. And then you combine that with bad weather, you've got some serious navigational uncertainty.
Yeah, I see where you're going with this. And wasn't there something about the ship's pumps, too?
You're right. The log does mention problems with the pumps. And when the Dea Gracia found the Mary Celeste, there was about 3.5 feet of water in the hold.
3.5 feet, is that a lot?
It might not sound like much, but for a ship like the Mary Celeste, yeah, it is. It's not a good sign.
Especially if the pumps weren't working right. I mean, were they damaged or something?
Well, they couldn't figure out exactly what was wrong with them, but you gotta remember they were sailing through some rough seas. Maybe a storm damaged them, or maybe they were just overwhelmed with the amount of water coming in.
Either way, if those pumps weren't keeping up.
Briggs would have been in real danger of sinking.
Oh, wow. So let me see if I've got this straight. You're Captain Briggs. You're in the middle of a storm. You don't know for sure where you are. And your ship is taking on water faster than you can pump it out.
Exactly. And then, through the rain and the waves, you see land. Santa Maria Island, just a few miles away.
It'd be like a miracle.
Yeah, a chance for survival, but a risky one.
So you think Briggs decided to abandon ship to try and make it to the island in the lifeboat?
It's possible, right? I mean, in his mind, staying on board might have seemed even riskier. Maybe he thought the ship was going down. Maybe he thought they were farther out at sea than they were because of that faulty chronometer.
Or maybe all of those things together made him think abandoning ship was their only option.
Yeah. It really makes you think about the challenges they faced back then. No weather reports, no GPS.
That's like that perfect storm of bad circumstances. But if they did go for the island, why weren't they ever found? Wouldn't there have been a search?
Well, remember, this is the 19th century. Communication was slow, and search and rescue, well, it wasn't what it is today.
Right. Plus, the Atlantic is massive. That little lifeboat could have been blown off course, capsized, anything.
Yeah, and even if they did look for them, the chances of finding them would have been really, really low.
It's hard to imagine, isn't it?
It is. And that's probably why we're still talking about the Mary Celeste all these years later. We may never know what happened to them.
It's a real puzzle, isn't it? I mean, you've got this captain known for his skill and his faith, but he's facing this impossible situation.
Yeah.
And he's forced to make a decision that no captain ever wants to make.
Yeah, and I think it kind of challenges us, you know? It challenges our need for a neat and tidy explanation. I mean, for over 100 years, people have wanted this dramatic explanation for the Mary Celeste. Pirates, sea monsters.
I've even heard alien abduction.
Right. But maybe, just maybe, the truth is a lot simpler and a lot more unsettling.
Because it reminds us that we don't know everything.
Exactly, and that sometimes we're just not in control.
Like that old saying, right? Sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. But in this case, the truth is, well, we just don't know. Do you think we ever will?
I mean, it's possible. Maybe someday some new evidence will turn up. But for now, the sea's keeping its secrets. And maybe that's part of what makes the Mary Celeste so fascinating. It's a symbol of all the mysteries that are still out there, hidden in the depths. A reminder that nature can still surprise us.
It's true. We like to think we've got it all figured out. But then something like this happens and it makes you realize just how small we are. And it's important to remember the human cost of this mystery. Even if Briggs made the right call, given what he knew, it doesn't change the fact that people were lost.
You're absolutely right. And that loss, that's what resonates with people. It makes us think about our own mortality, you know, our vulnerability, and about the tough choices we might have to face. What would we do if we were in Briggs's shoes? Would we have the courage to make that kind of decision?
It's a question that sticks with you
Oh, right.
long after you've heard the story. So to anyone listening, if you want to learn more about the Mary Celeste, check out that YouTube video we mentioned. They've got some great visuals and they go into even more detail about the ship, the crew, all of it. And as you dive deeper into this mystery, think about this. Maybe the real lesson here isn't about finding the answer. Maybe it's about learning to live with the unknown.
Well said. Sometimes the journey is just as important as the destination.
And on that note, we'll leave you with one final thought. What would you do if you were sailing across the Atlantic and you came across this perfectly good ship, just drifting, empty, alone, the Mary Celeste?